The so-called blue wall is collapsing, according to the Liberal Democrats, and they point to these 4 MPs as proof of that. All of them have won seats from the Conservatives in recent by-elections.
It's primarily Conservative MPs that we've got in our sights. I have to say there's a few SNP MPs in Scotland who are going to be worried about the Liberal Democrat threat too.
I'll go off and do number 3 here.
Clive Jones is hoping to oust the current Tory MP for Wokingham. John Redwood has held the seat for nearly 4 decades, but his majority fell from 24,000 in 2015 to just over 7,000 in the last general election. And it's voters like Angela who the Lib Dems are confident they can win over.
I'm definitely wavering because the Conservatives they're not doing that much for me. I mean, they're not doing much for the country.
If Clive Jones wins the seat, he'll be the first ever Lib Dem MP for Wokingham.
We took over the running of the council last year. The vast majority of residents like what we've been doing. Our job is to make sure that we get rid of as many Conservative MPs as possible.
But before the Lib Dems had even set foot in Bournemouth, Rishi Sunak was fighting back. Delays to some green policies and a review of the HS2 rail link designed to keep voters from sliding away, at least in Tory heartlands.
On HS2, we do have to respond to the budgets. In particular, we've been hit not just by coronavirus, but also by the war in Ukraine. And I think any responsible government looks at that and says, does this still stack up?
Another possible sweetener has been floated today, a cut to inheritance tax. This street 2 miles from the conference centre is the most expensive in the southwest, according to the Halifax. The average price of a house here is over £4 million. Rishi Sunak may have won a few more fans here, following a report in the Sunday Times today that says he's considering slashing inheritance tax. It claims that he wants to reduce it next year and eventually phase it out altogether. In reality, few people are likely to benefit from such a tax cut. Only 3.7% of estates have to pay any inheritance tax at all.
Well, when I hear a Conservative leader talk about inheritance tax, I know they're in a weak position and running out of track. I've heard it so many times.
You talk about the Conservatives being in a weak position. I mean, isn't that the case with your party too? You're at 12% in the polls. That's the same as 2019, near enough. You don't seem to be making any inroads.
Oh, we do. I mean, look at the parliamentary by-elections, because it's real votes in real ballot boxes that really matter to me.
But is winning a dozen or so seats from the Tories the height of your ambition?
Well, I put no ceiling on that height, and what's been clear to me as we've gone through this parliament is the Conservatives have so mismanaged our country. I've never known our country so badly governed. Lots of lifelong Conservatives are looking for somewhere else to go.
So the fuse has been lit on the next general election campaign. As far as the Liberal Democrats are concerned, the battle lines have been drawn right through traditional Tory heartlands.
Well, I spoke to Wokingham's Conservative MP, Sir John Redwood, a little earlier, and I began by asking whether he was in favour of a cut in inheritance tax.
Well, yes, I would like to see inheritance tax cut, but I think it's not the priority. And I don't think anybody is suggesting we should be cutting inheritance tax in the next budget. I'm concentrating on the things this government can do soon to improve the state of the economy, to get us more capacity, to bear down on price inflation, which is still too high.
Do you not accept, as the Transport Secretary said today, that the Chancellor is in a straitjacket fiscally? Well,
you can let yourself get into a straitjacket if you accept the Office of Budget Responsibility forecasts, which usually greatly overstate the amount of borrowing we're going to have to do. They've had to revise their borrowing forecasts this year down yet again. But I think we also need to balance the rather modest tax cuts in terms of Treasury costs that I've just itemised with expenditure controls.
Looking at the future, you've set out an array of tax cuts that you'd like to see soon. You're talking within the next few weeks or months, are you, in the November statement?
Yeah, urgent. We need to expand the capacity of the economy now and get the prices of energy down. I think we need to do something about energy pricing because we have very uncompetitive energy prices in this country. So we are literally closing industry and energy activities in Britain and turning to imports instead, which is a very bad model.
If you don't get growth, though, which obviously everybody wants, but if you don't get that, you're not suggesting, are you, cutting public services? So what would you cut? NHS waiting lists are at a record high. The ceilings are falling down in our schools. You can't cut those services. They're cut to the bone, aren't they?
No, I'm all in favour of increasing expenditure on health and education in the way that the government has been doing and is setting out. And we obviously need to spend it wisely, but I've identified a number of areas where you can reduce the current figures for public spending. I mean, I, for example, would rephase the 20 billion they're proposing on carbon capture and storage, because I think you have got to do it at an affordable rate. I think it's a very good idea to look at the runaway costs of the HS2 project. And
when you say look at the costs,
we may well get news on that. Well, of course, you don't axe it entirely because you've got contractual commitments, and presumably we can finish the railway line from Birmingham to Old Oak Common and have something to show for the billions we've been spending. But what you need to do is to stop this massive inflation of costs. And if that entails having to curtail the amount of railway you're going to get, so be it.
But it's now, if you do what you suggest, it would be a tiny little rump, mutilated, according to the former Prime Minister Boris Johnson, and we'd be the only major European country without a high-speed rail network. Does that not bother you?
Well, yes, the failure to deliver bothers me a great deal, and I think people who are responsible for it need to answer a lot of questions about why contracts have gone so wrong and why the expenditure is so out of control.
The Lib Dems are holding their conference this weekend. They're trying to smash the so-called blue wall, Tory seats just like yours in southern England. Do you think that a programme of tax cuts would help you stave them off?
Well, I'm not motivated by responding to the Lib Dems. Lib Dems always claim they're going to win our seats, and so far they don't normally do so. But
you're not worried?
The electors will make their own judgment in due course.
Sir John Redwood, thank you very much.